the patient really is the centre of this. And I think we're going to see a tsunami of consumer-led disruption where the consumers are going to say, no, we're not going to do it the old way anymore. We really want to be a part of this. And I think that's a great thing.
Hi there, you're very welcome to another All in Business, your weekly business show here on JOE, backed by AIB. I'm coming to you once again from my home, and today we'll be looking at what small and medium businesses can do to help out during the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll be speaking to Dr. Johnny Walker, interventional radiologist and founder of Jinga Life, and we'll also be joined by Michael Kelly, the founder and CEO of Grow Your Own. After that, we'll be speaking to our trailblazer, Padraic O'Griallais, founder of the Micil Distillery in Salt Hill, County Galway, who's adapted his small family business to help out with the production of a new vital product during this crisis. Now, don't forget to hit subscribe as always to get the full show on podcast and YouTube each week so that you never miss an episode. Now, let's meet our panel.
JOE presents All In, together with AIB, backing Irish business.
Johnny and Michael, thank you for joining us remotely this morning, and you're very welcome to the show. Since this show in particular is about how small and medium enterprises can help out during the COVID-19 pandemic, I guess I'll start by asking you both how the crisis has affected your businesses, how it's affected you personally and in a business sense.
Michael.
Oh, you want me first? Sorry, Yvonne. I was patiently waiting there. I guess we've got two sides to our business. I guess we've got a public-facing business and restaurant and shop here in Waterford called JOE.ie. And then we've got, I suppose, the campaigning program side of our business, which is all about trying to help people to grow food. So the two businesses have been affected completely differently. We've had, obviously, like most restaurants and cafes, we closed to the public about 3 weeks ago, I guess, at this stage. We were initially hoping to keep going as a, with a collection service, a contactless catering type service for customers. And particularly the hospital, University Hospital Waterford is right across the road for us. So we have a lot of healthcare workers as customers. So we kind of felt that would have been a good service to offer them. But we just felt then with the new round of restrictions that came in, then we couldn't keep that going. So it's completely closed to the public now. So all of our courses and education work, our cafe and our shop are closed. So that's a very, very strange situation, particularly at this time of the year when it's so beautiful around with the garden coming into life and so on. And then on the, we've had to obviously put some staff on temporary layoff. Others we've been able to kind of maintain, keep on the payroll using the wage subsidy scheme the government have, which has been very, very useful to us and very helpful. And on the JOE side, then we're busier than ever because there's just been this absolute surge in interest in food growing at this time, and so we're our team on the JOE side, which is about 10 people, are working from home, and we're absolutely inundated. So I suppose you're kind of trying to manage two very different responses and just respond to the increased demand on one side of the house with very limited resources and income under severe pressure on that side of it as well. So it's a very mixed bag that we're trying to react to. But we're very lucky, I suppose, in the sense that the people who can work from home are able to do that, and we're able to keep that service going.
Actually, one of our own producers, Alice, sent us in a picture yesterday of her own grow it yourself efforts at home, which are coming along very nicely, as you can see there. But I'd imagine, you mentioned an increase in demand, which is exactly what I would have expected, but how big an increase are we talking?
To give you a sense of it, we sell those little starter kits, the Grow Box kits. Great to see hers doing so well. I suppose in last week we probably sold more of them in 1 week than when we did in the whole of spring last year. It's just been absolutely insane, and that's reflected across lots of other online kind of retailers, seed retailers, and so on that we've been speaking to. So it's probably up 600-700%, I guess.
Wow.
Website traffic as well. Just people are, I guess, they're crying out for kind of knowledge about how to do it, and not really sure where to start. So I think that's where we see our kind of our efforts need to be. And even with our TV series, which started back on RTE about 3 weeks ago, the viewer numbers have more or less doubled since based against last year. So it's just insane, And I think it kind of reflects two things. I think it's the people are obviously bored at home and wanting to, keep themselves busy and keep the kids busy and do things that'll keep them sane and healthy at this time. But there's also, I think, a kind of a vulnerability there that we're worried about, all of the systems in our society that we trust and take for granted most of the time, I think, are under threat and don't feel as stable as they used to. So I think people we saw a bit of this back in the, 2008, 2009, when things were, like when the recession hit. But this is on a different level of magnitude altogether. And I think partly it's just people wanting to sort of feel like they're taking a little bit of control back of where their food comes from. And that's, even though we're not talking food shortages yet, thankfully, I think people are sort of conscious of that in the back of their minds as well.
And what about you, Johnny? Because obviously you're still... You're as well as being the founder of Jinga Life, you're an interventional radiologist and you're still working in that sphere. So you're right on the front lines. How are you doing personally with that? And equally importantly, what's the impact been on your business?
I grew up during the AIDS epidemic down in St. Vincent's in Sydney, 100 yards from Oxford Street. So we were truly the epicenter of HIV. And any young male coming in between the age of 16 and 46 was HIV until proven otherwise. And of course, we couldn't prove, but we had to treat them on spec until we could. And we got through that, and we didn't think we would. And so I've seen a fair bit of that, and also TB in rural and remote areas around the world. But this is an extraordinary virus. It really is. And I just don't think we've yet felt the real bite of it. From a clinical point of view, we were batting on as normal right up until about the beginning of last week. And then on the, and I'm an interventional radiologist, as you say, so we operate under X-ray, ultrasound, CT guidance, using local anaesthetic and pinhole technologies to go in and target tissues in the body, which might be infection, but they could also be cancer. So we're going in and doing biopsies, and if it does come back nasty, we'll put lines into the heart so we can give chemotherapy and various other stuff that will hopefully help the patient. So we've been busy and always are. And then on the 31st of March, the government asked to partner with the private non-public hospital network, of which I think there are about 19 of us in the country. And all of those hospitals have stepped up and thrown their resources in terms of people and time and facilities into this challenge, hopefully to take some of the pressure off the public system where the acute COVID patients will be going in. And so we're working under a sort of a new world at the moment. It's not hugely different. I operated all day yesterday, and we still do the cases as we would on their merit, but it's just a little bit of uncertainty. And of course, the big thing that's changed for us is the personal protective equipment that we've got to use, and so the gowning and the de-gowning. Whilst we're always using sterile technique, it's now sort of at a real crescendo. So that's slowed us down a little bit in terms of our systems, but otherwise, we're batting on, and we're there, and we're there 24/7. So it's great just to be a part of it. And I think what will be terrific is just to see this coupling of the public and the private into just one united effort and one massive collaboration. And I think that's the only way we're going to win. On the entrepreneurial side, on the digital side, for the last 5-6 years, I've been evangelising the need for us to really empower the captain of care in every family. We call this person the Jinga, after the great African warrior Queen Jinga, and we want to empower the Jinga by giving her a family electronic health record all in the palm of her hand. so that she's got all of the information she needs for all her loved ones from womb right through to term, but still able to connect through to the GP, the community nurse, the all-important community nurse, the physio, the dentist, the pharmacist, this untapped resource on the high street, and then specialists like me in hospitals when and as required. And so we built all that, and we've had 165,000 downloads, and that's being used regularly. And then the Jingas came to us and they've designed the whole thing and said, Johnny, can you do away with the CD-ROMs? And normally when you go and have an MRI or a CAT scan, you get given a CD-ROM to take off to the specialist. We've done away with all of that and done that completely digitally, so that can all be shared in the cloud. And just last week, we've got the very first strong, robust steps now with the HSE to try and remove CD-ROMs from our patient journey completely, because they're a vector for infection. And hopefully we'll now be able to get some traction within the HSE and the wider healthcare environment. So whilst it's a perfect storm sort of hitting us on one side, it's another opportunity on the other side, and we're going to try and bring them together.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're both kind of in fields that are contributing at the moment to, well, contributing to getting people through this pandemic, but also probably going to contribute to societal changes we're going to see thereafter. So I suppose, Johnny, for you, it's really telemedicine having its day in the sun. And for you, Michael, a 600% increase in demand for grow it yourself packs is, it's not insignificant. So apart from your own roles in kind of perpetuating this change, I'd be interested to see what you both think, what else you think will change for the country and for people irreversibly when this is all over. Where are we going?
Well, I think, Michael, do you want me to bat off on that one?
Yeah, you go for it. Yeah.
One thing I hope doesn't stay the same as we are in this acute setting now, Yvonne, is the 2 meters of separation. I must say I'm a very physical person, I'm a very personal person. I'm finding the 2 meters of separation, particularly even with my patients in the clinical setting. But I live at the foot of the pier here in Dunleary, and that 2 meters, it just seems like a massive distance to be separated. I'm hoping that we'll be able to come back together, because I think there's just some real energy and real power about the physicality of proximity, of just being close to each other. So I hope that comes back. I think from a medical point of view, we will never again care for patients the way we used to, and that's a great thing. I think you'll see digital come in where we've now proved it can step up at relatively short notice, and not only in the face of adversity, but you'll see so much more efficiency where we're able to care for patients in a much more safer, a faster, more productive and more efficient way in the future, just by using handheld technologies and empowering patients in a way that they've never been empowered before, and really realising that the patient really is the centre of this. And I think we're going to see a tsunami of consumer-led disruption where the consumers are going to say, no, we're not going to do it the old way anymore. We really want to be a part of this. And I think that's a great thing. What
about you, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the bigger picture with the food system, I think there's phenomenal change coming down the tracks there as well. And I think what's been really interesting to see, I guess, is that even though food supplies have held up very well, I think we are starting to hear some narrative around fresh food shortages, and it's really exposed something we've been saying for years, unfortunately, which is that over the last 20 to 30 years, the number of veg and fruit growers commercially has just, absolutely plummeted, and they've been driven out of the market by, obviously cheaper imports coming in, but also the price promotions that we see, unfortunately, all the time in supermarkets, which have become a permanent feature of life, really. And I think the kind of the worries that I have about the medium term, I think, is that almost all of the veg and fruit across Europe is actually picked by seasonal labour, an awful lot of it from Eastern Europe, and that labour supply has completely dried up. So because people can't, either they've gone home or they can't get out of their own countries to do it, and so that's leading to serious labour shortages. That, for example, the asparagus crop in Germany has been, they're talking about leaving it in the ground We've got problems with soft fruit, things like strawberries coming into harvest next month and so on, even here in Ireland. So it's really exposed, I suppose, how we always talk about self-sufficiency in JOE and getting people to grow their own food as a way to become that bit more self-sufficient, but and live healthier and more sustainably at the same time. But I think it's really highlighted this crisis how we're so reliant on imports of food, particularly veg and fruit. Like up to 90% of the veg and fruit we eat in this country is imported. And so I think that's going to shift. I think more people are going to get back into horticulture in Ireland, and growers are going to start growing more of their own food, because I think they'll have to. The supermarkets will need it, and I think more people at an individual level will get into growing their own food as well. And I think that's, again, as Johnny said, there are some positive legacies coming out of the awfulness of this crisis, and it's not about taking advantage of anything, but I think there are potentially very positive outcomes. And if we become more local, more seasonal, more focused on homegrown produce, whether that's in your own gardens or in our own country, I think that would be a really positive legacy to come out of it.
And tell us about the Seeds the Day campaign, Michael.
Yeah, well, I guess what, again, we always see this, that there's a huge lack of knowledge around food growing, because we've just completely disconnected from it as a society, and so our job is always to give people the skills they need to do it successfully. So we felt at this time we wanted to respond to that by giving people as much knowledge as we could. So part of it was kind of repurposing some of our existing programs. So we do a huge campaign with Innocent called The Big Grow in primary schools. Obviously, we had to completely recalibrate that when the schools closed. And we do another big campaign with Energia, which is a kind of a community garden focused campaign, which we've had to recalibrate as well. And then we felt, we wanted to make whole rafts of our materials, like our books and things, available free online. And with the Seeds the Day campaign, we've got a daily video challenge going out at 11 o'clock every day, where we just, we set people very simple growing challenges to hopefully sort of get them started, and then link them back into the bigger resources behind that. And similar way to Johnny, I guess, where the potential for technology to assist people to grow their own food is huge. We're developing an app at the moment, and obviously looking at podcasts and other technologies just to connect people with that knowledge that they need at this time.
And Michael, so many people live in apartments, particularly in the urban areas, less so in Ireland. Do you have solutions and products that permit growth of your food from a sustainability point of view within the apartments?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's the key message to get across to people sometimes, is that, you don't need a big allotment or a big back garden to do this, that, self-sufficiency is a spectrum as opposed to, a single point destination. It's always about trying to, any movement you can make from complete reliance on the supermarket to some more self-sufficiency is a positive thing. And obviously you're limited by the space that you have in terms of exactly how much you can grow. But, I always mention this guy that we had out of a festival we ran a few years ago, who grew, 700 pounds sterling worth of veg on a balcony in London. So most of the things that we like to eat in terms of veg and fruit can grow quite successfully in pots and containers on a balcony. Not as much as you would on an acre in a field in the countryside, but still very worthwhile and can be surprisingly productive, actually. The courgette is a great example. We grew it in the TV series last year, and it was, you can get 20 to 30 courgettes from a single plant in a container on a balcony. So it's surprising how much you can produce in a small space.
And so, if the future of food is very much in our own hands, Michael, I'd put the same question to you, Johnny. You've told us a little bit about Jinga Life, and we've talked about telemedicine generally, but what would your hope be for the future of digital medicine being in our own hands after this pandemic?
I do hope that ultimately we all become the custodian of our own data from the start. I hate that word data, but I think it's really, really important just to have your own medical record, knowing your past medical and surgical history, knowing your immunisation history, which is going to be so vital now with hopefully a vaccination in the not too far distant future. And then being able to connect with the various members of the medical ecosystem freely and accessibly, and to be able to do that 24/7 from wherever you are anytime in the world. And I think that'll see a real new level of empowerment for the patient and for their carers in a way that we've never done before. And I think we're going to look back, and I didn't think this was possibly going to happen in my lifetime, but I think it now will. We will look back and we'll think, how did we ever do it the old way?
Yeah, with paper as well, if we're going to go paper free. And I know a lot of people, even online, on the front lines have been saying that they quite easily just completely cut out paper. So that's probably a big change we'll see. Johnny, I hate putting you on the spot, but I'm going to anyway.
No worries. Go.
Where do you think we are now? I mean, on every TV show, every radio show, it's the question people keep asking because it's the question we so desperately want an answer to. How long more have we got to go, do you think?
Oh, I think I know they're talking about the humps, the hills, and Trump's got various other names for all sorts of mountains and whatever each night. But I've just got to feel that we've done well. I think we went in really early. It was quite courageous, quite brave. I think the lockdown was imperative, and whilst the numbers are going up, they're coming up incrementally at a lower rate than they were. And certainly Ireland, if you look at all the curves where we're mapped out against the other countries, we're sitting down in that lower third. So we're doing a lot of things right. So I think in Ireland, I'm hoping that we'll be able to manage this with our current resources and we'll get through it, and we've got a real shape, form and structure to the plan. So I'm really quite confident in that regard. There are other countries that I'm worried about. I'm particularly worried about Sub-Saharan Africa and the third world countries where this is, if this does hit, it's going to hit with a mammoth impact that we've probably not have ever seen before. And that's what frightens me. I think the US, look, they'll pick up and recover. We're seeing Italy tail off now. We're seeing Spain beginning to drop away in terms of their numbers. Having said that, Singapore's popped up again today. Hong Kong's popped up again today. So it could be the start of their second wave. But look, it's a very complex virus. It's mutating rapidly, and it's so much at this stage brighter than we are. And but we will beat it. We will beat it. And I think Ireland, we're going to be okay. It won't be as horrific as it potentially could have been if we hadn't have done what we did earlier.
And as Easter weekend approaches, Johnny, I think probably a lot of people at this point might have itchy feet. Would there be any message you want to give to them in terms of social distancing and the need to kind of hold fast?
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to extend the lockdown. I'd be very surprised if they don't take us through possibly to the end of April. And, there are brighter people than me making decisions on that. I think, but in the interim, the hand washing. I think the hand washing now, Yvonne, will become part of our culture. So often we always had the hand washing at the front of the hospital. So many people would just walk in, walk past it, and what have you. Now everyone's going in and seeking where is the hand washing devices. So I think that's going to become part of our culture, and that'll be one of the great legacies of this virus. So the hand washing is imperative, and the social distancing is just an absolute must. An absolute must. And I know it's going to be it's coming up to Easter, and it's probably going to be the most beautiful weather, and it's going to be so hard. But we've really, really got to come tight now. It could happen to anybody, and we've got to understand that this is a real devil of a virus.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. Good advice there. And Michael, I just wanted to ask you before we run out of time, because a sort of similar question in that it's about Easter weekend, but maybe for those people I mentioned who might be getting itchy feet and might be thinking about flouting rules and travelling somewhere for a bit of a break, maybe they could turn that attention and that energy towards their gardens instead. For anyone who wants to do that in the coming days, what advice would you have for them on how to get started?
I like, before I get into that, I'd absolutely echo what Johnny says, and like the bravery being shown by our healthcare staff. Like, it's breathtaking, you know, what people are putting themselves to. So, you know, don't make it worse for them by getting out and about at Easter. The good news is, I suppose, from a food growing perspective, it's a brilliant thing to do for your mental and physical health. Even the act of food growing, whether you get food from it or not, I suppose, is a really positive thing you can do this weekend. And the good news is, I mean, it's been brilliant weather for the last couple of weeks. We're coming into absolute prime seed sowing territory. The next 2 months, you know, pretty much everything can be grown: potatoes, peas, carrots, parsnips, tomatoes, peppers, you name it, like herbs, salad leaves. And there are lots of retailers like ourselves still selling seeds online. We can get that stuff out to you. I know some of the supermarkets are also doing that. So you can get bags of compost and seeds in safely in supermarkets. So absolutely divert that energy into growing some of your own food, and hopefully you'll have, you know, it's one of those things, we always say this, it's such an optimistic thing, growing your own food, you know. Really, it's a kind of almost like a ludicrously optimistic thing that this tiny little seed will, you know, eventually become a plant that'll feed you and your family. And you're always looking, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the line. So it's a very forward looking, optimistic thing, and reason for hope that there's a harvest ahead of us all down the tracks at some stage.
And for a novice like myself, Michael, if I wanted to get out into the garden this Saturday, Sunday, Monday, what should I be going for? What seed would you recommend? Be it in a garden or for people in the city with a small balcony? Where do you start?
Do I have to pick one, or can I? It's like picking a favorite child.
Pick 2 or 3. We'll give you 2 or 3.
Okay, right. Well, I always think salad leaves are fantastic. You know, they're quick growing. You can be harvesting within 3 to 4 weeks. So any, you know, things like rocket and mustard and mizuna, those kind of oriental greens are fantastic. Herbs, you know, in the picture there you saw like the likes of dill and coriander and basil. You know, very quick growing, very easy to grow as well. And, you know, if I was to pick one thing outside, I would say, like, obviously potatoes are a brilliant thing to grow, really straightforward. And from one potato, you get a plant that produces, you know, 15, 20 other potatoes. So what's not to like? You know, it's a brilliant and really straightforward thing to grow as well. So, yeah, I think any of those would be great to get started. And obviously JOE.ie for loads more information. And sorry, Johnny, yeah.
Mike, for the kids, I remember when I was a little fella, we grew up on a farm, but just the wonder of the growth of things you plant, and that whole joy of seeing these little things pop out of the soil, and then you being a part of that, and then just watching them grow just like you were growing. And as a family, that was just an incredible thing for us. The sadness came when we came to eat them, a bit like our cows, God love them. But we had our names for our particular shaped strawberries, and then when they were eventually put on the table when Mum served them up, we knew we were eating Cynthia or something else. But it was such a joy, and I think, you know, the joy that you're bringing to so many families will be something really, really valued by them all. So well done. Keep it lit.
Very much. Yeah. And it pales into insignificance by comparison to the work you're doing, Johnny. But thank you for that.
And now, guys, you're both doing your part. Compliments abound, but deserved on both sides. You're both doing your part, and that's why we were delighted to have you both on to hear about that today. So thanks for joining us. That's where we're going to leave it. Keep up the good work, both of you. Johnny on the front lines, and take care of yourself. And Michael, it looks like you're going to be championing a new wave of horticulture right around the country. So really interesting for us to keep tabs on that as well. And hopefully we'll have you both back at some point in the near future. But for now, that's where we'll leave it. Thanks so much to you both.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Cheers, guys. Stay safe.
Now, my next guest turned his 150-year family history of brewing alcohol into an alcohol-based hand sanitiser production facility almost overnight. Micil Distillery is now distributing the product to charities in need like the Irish Cancer Society and the Simon Community. Founder Padraic O'Griallais is here to tell us about the change of pace. Padraic, thanks for joining us from Spiddle this morning. I'm going to start by asking you to give us a little bit of background about the company for people who might not know.
Yeah, very good morning to yourself, Yvonne. Micil Distillery, we're based in Salt Hill, just on the outskirts of Galway City. And I suppose what a lot of people, always question is, where does the name come from? And it's actually named in honour of my great-great-great-grandfather. We've actually been distilling poteen for 6 generations and over 170 years. So I thought it was appropriate that we'd name the brand after the original. And that's where we got the name for the distillery. I started the distillery back in 2016, and it was Galway's only operating distillery. It still is. And so we've branched into making gin as well. And we were going to release or start making our whiskey, but we've delayed that now until the COVID virus thing is over. And I suppose because of the huge shortage out there at the moment of hand sanitizer, we decided to turn our hand to fill the shortage that's there.
And what was your light bulb moment when the pandemic hit? Were you actively looking for ways to adapt anyway, or were you just hit with inspiration?
I guess you could call it inspiration. One thing I suppose that happened was the demand, for our product declined fairly dramatically because we're selling most of our products through the sort of bars and restaurants, and obviously they shut down. The other thing is we do tours here at the distillery, or we did, and that obviously came to a standstill. So we were like, okay, we've a couple of options here. We can kind of keep it going, like, 1 day a week or something like that, dispatching to the wholesalers that we deal with. And we decided, actually, there's a huge shortage of hand sanitizer. We had a number of phone calls in the weeks in the run-up to this. And I thought, look, why don't we just do this? There's obviously a great need. I think particularly it was maybe some of the more critical sort of organisations or companies locally that were kind of like, look, we actually can't get our hands on hand sanitizer. Is there any chance you can help us out? So we were like, look, leave it with me. And over the course of a couple of days, we decided, this is something that could be really good for the community, and also to keep us busy while this thing is ongoing.
And that must have been something of a learning curve. I mean, I'm not sure of the correlation between distilling and making alcohol-based hand sanitizer, but presumably I would think you had to go off and learn how one makes hand sanitizer to begin with, did you?
Yeah, there was a bit of a learning curve. To be honest, the biggest learning curve for me was actually, dealing with new regulations. So we're very strictly regulated in terms of making alcohol, and then throw into the mix a whole set of new regulations. So we had to get permission from the likes of the Department of Agriculture, the Revenue Commissioners, the HSE, and they have various stuff that they need, complied with, so that was a bit of a steep learning curve. But anyway, got myself up to speed on all of that with some intense study and all the rest of it. And Googling, absolutely, phoning people, contacting people, but I have to say the regulatory bodies were actually very helpful on this occasion. There was not much bureaucracy or red tape. They fairly kind of opened the doors, and they were actually willing to help, if you had a query. There was no delays. Believe me, I've experienced delays before, trying to get the distillery up and running, months of delays and stuff,
It's funny how things can be fast-tracked during a crisis, and hopefully this efficiency will stay with us afterwards.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. And Padraic, I know you're a small team up there of 3, so you must be run ragged at the moment trying to get this all done by yourself. Was it a case of trying to rope in friends or neighbours or siblings or partners or everybody you could get your hands on?
So at the moment, we just literally started blending our first batch of hand sanitizer there on the weekend, and it's being packaged yesterday and again today. So I probably will need more hands on deck, and for that, actually, in fairness, I've had a number of friends who've offered, to help out, in the short term, because they're not exactly, busy now, I suppose. So yeah, we'll be able to get a few people in, obviously, keep them distant and everything like that, and get them helping out on the packaging side of things. But it's a team of three: myself, my brother, my business partner Ross. So yeah, you could say we're run ragged, but we're kind of used to that, being such a small team.
And most importantly, you got approval from the top dog in the family.
Absolutely, my grandfather. So he was actually very encouraging, actually, in terms of doing this. He actually thought it could be something we'd continue into the future. So we'll see about that. My goal with this is just to keep us going while this crisis is ongoing, and we hope to resume normality then when normality resumes. But he thought we might even continue it after the whole thing.
And are you a Gaeilge or Padraic?
Yeah, it's Gaeilge to me. I'm a native speaker.
Because I had just been reading another article that you were talking about the importance of the word Micil in Connemara and what it means to communities like yours. Tell us a little bit about that community spirit.
So just to explain for people what the word Micil is, it's collaboration or people helping each other out. So I guess in the traditional days, people used to sort of help each other, whether it was the kind of saving hay or kind of laborious tasks like that. Everybody would kind of give each other a dig out. With the, I suppose, the unwritten rule was that you would return the favour, and I think that was kind of gone, if you like, in recent times, and I think this whole crisis has actually brought the old values out, if you like. So I've very much found that people have become very, very helpful, but very willing to help out and collaborate and everything like that, with no expectation actually of anything in return. So it was wonderful to see the change of spirit. And if anything, there's a lot of positives after coming out of the whole pandemic, and that's people, realising maybe what's important.
And tell me about the history of poaching in Connemara, because I actually didn't realise that, it's so associated with the region. And I think you're saying 160, 170 years, but you're the first person to take the family business legal, I suppose.
I am the first person to do it legitimately. It wasn't possible actually to get a license until 1997 to actually make poutine. Right. And I am the first in the family. Now, Connemara does have a huge tradition with poutine making. In fact, I think the west of Ireland would be very strong for poutine making. And I suppose if you're to draw sort of a horizontal, a diagonal line across Ireland from the southwest up to the northeast, the west and northern part of the country would be the strongest in terms of poutine making. Anyway, I suppose it was illegal, and I suppose one of the reasons why it was illegal, or the only reason it was illegal, is because of tax, despite what people think. So it was made illegal by British Parliament in the year 1760.
Right. Okay. So a long history. Another quote I read from you in an article somewhere was, Connemara has a long history of paying very little attention to British imposed rules.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Left, right, and centre. Well, just to take you back to rules for a minute, we were talking about red tape there a few minutes ago, and just for people who might be watching or listening to this and thinking that their business could pivot in these difficult times. Where does one start with that? When you had this particular idea, who I'm showing my ignorance here of this particular industry, but who do you call and say, I want to make this massive pivot? How do I go about it?
So there's nobody like we called apart from the regulatory bodies. It was more a decision that we had to make as owners. I was particularly pushing for it because I thought it would be really kind of good from a community perspective, and we kind of hope that people will remember the good deed as well. When things go, when things revert to whatever you want to call it, relative normality. So I think, people just need to decide. I operate a lot on gut, and the gut kind of said to me, look, this is something you should be doing. So that was my decision. Then you sort of look at, well, what are the risks here? What are the opportunities? What are the benefits, I suppose the negatives. And overall for me, it all weighed up really positive. I couldn't really see it being too negative, because already, I suppose, 90% of our revenues had been wiped out. So we said, okay, let's just do something to keep us busy, keep the doors open. So I suppose with that in mind, it's not really like a profit-making exercise for us. What we're doing is selling as close to cost as possible to those who can afford it, and those who can't afford it, we're doing our best, I suppose, to give them free stock.
And you mentioned your gut instinct there, and going by that a lot. Was it your gut that led you to give up your career in teaching to move into business?
Absolutely. That's not to say that I didn't do my research beforehand, but I think gut ultimately was the kind of driving force. You can find any amount of data and studies, to sort of back up what you're doing. But what I've always found with startups or with successful companies, it's not so much, okay, great ideas, wonderful. There's any amount of great ideas out there. But what I've seen more often than not, and you'll hear, I think, a lot of successful entrepreneurs speak about this, it's more about the team. It's more about the execution of the idea rather than the actual idea. I've seen a lot of average or good ideas being executed brilliantly, and then I've seen a lot of brilliant ideas executed poorly, so, and sometimes could be the right idea, wrong time, so timing is really important for certain ideas as well.
And you guys you're not actually up and running that long. You're quite young as a company, 2016. So what inspired the timing or the choice of 2016? Did you just have itchy feet to get going, or was there something particularly about the market in 2016 that prompted you to do it then?
I think the timing was probably pretty good. We weren't in recession, but we were coming out of it. For me, it was more kind of personal timing. I felt the timing is right. One thing that I was looking for, so I come from an education background. I was a teacher for 5 years, and I loved that, of course, but I decided, I think I prefer being self-employed, being my own boss, and building a brand. So the route to market piece for me, in terms of how to get the product to market, was something I was completely new to. So we managed to partner up with a company called Richmond Marketing, who do our distribution of our poutine. So when that door opened, or that opportunity presented itself, that for me was the kind of catalyst that made the final decision. Okay, now's the time. So once that opportunity presented, I was like, okay, time to put all the eggs into one basket, if you like.
And what did you teach, Padraic? It didn't happen to be anything like business or economics, did it?
No, actually, Irish and geography were my two subjects.
So, very little correlation there, unfortunately. Padraic, I'm interested to see what you think about post-pandemic, the impact on bars and restaurants. Do you think it will ever be business as usual as it was, or are we looking at just a slightly slower pace of life for a long time?
Really hard to call how exactly it's going to pan out. I think we're going to probably get a bit of a, how would I put it, a bit of a lift, when all of this, when we come out of the whole pandemic. I think there's going to be a bit of a boost there. Economically, though, I think there's probably going to be a bit of a delay in actual overall impact. So we'll probably get a spike once this is all over. However, I think people are going to have to be kind of prudent afterwards, and because people, some people have lost their jobs, etc. So there's probably going to be delay in terms of resuming where we left off. We're definitely going to be in a bit of a dip, and we're going to have to lift ourselves out of the dip. But that said, I don't think it's going to be, hopefully it won't be, 2008 kind of stuff, 2009 stuff. Hopefully it'll be not as bad as that. I don't, again, we're not as reliant on, construction and stuff like that. So I think we're probably in a better position. Now, that said, it's going to cost a lot of money to pay all those wages and dig ourselves out of the hole. But we've done it before, and we'll certainly do it again. But yeah, I think there's going to be a bit of a delay.
And you mentioned there earlier that the hand sanitizer has just been packaged up and it's ready to go now for the first time. What's the next step in rolling that out?
So we've already agreed with some local community groups, I suppose, that we're going to supply them. So we're going to supply them first. We've had endless amounts of phone calls, emails, communication from different companies and people looking for it. So I'm just going to go to people who contacted us first on the list and just let them know, look, there's a little bit of availability, or there isn't, and we might have some in the next few weeks or whatever, and just communicating with people, look, this is what we have, is this any good to you? And then work from there. So basically it's kind of first come, first served, obviously prioritising the most critical of the organisations and the local community groups.
Well, fair play to you, Padraic. It's quite a pivot, and I'm sure, never mind business-wise, I'm sure reputationally it's going to do a lot for your brand. I look forward to seeing both your products, the alcohol and the alcohol-based sanitizers, on shelves long into the future. And I think that's where we'll leave it because we've run out of time. But thanks so much for joining us from Spittle, and we'll talk to you really soon.
Thanks a million, Yvonne. Talk to you soon.
Bye, Padraic. Well, that's it from us for this week. Thanks so much to my guests for being with us, Johnny Walker, Michael Kelly and Padraic O'Griallais. We will, of course, see you next week. In the meantime, don't forget to hit subscribe to get the full show on podcast and YouTube so that you never miss an episode. See you next week.